I was 6 rungs from daylight, from safety, when I heard it climbing up the ladder behind me. Faster and faster. This is it, I knew. I wouldn't make it. There would be no time. Damn it, Charlie. I used to work for the government. Past tense. And I'm not going to specify which branch or which office, because the people who signed my clearance paperwork would prefer that you didn't know, and I would prefer to keep what's left of a pension. Call it a field unit. Call it the kind of people who get called when the cover story has to be airtight and the paperwork has to be losable. The specific letters on the door don't matter. What matters is that I was one of 96 men who boarded 3 separate aircraft in the second week of January in the winter of 2014, and that only 4 of us came home, and that the place we were sent to no longer exists because the people who owned it poured enough concrete into it to sink a building. I'm telling this now because I don't think we handled it. I think it's still down there, and I think somebody ought to know. I've gone back and forth for the last several years about whether to put any of this down. The non-disclosure agreements I signed have teeth. The people who wrote them have longer memories than I do. I know a man who told a story he wasn't supposed to tell at a bar in Norfolk in 2016, and the man he told it to was not the man he thought he was telling it to, and the man who told the story is no longer with us in the way people usually are no longer with us. So I have thought about this. I have thought about this for a long time, and I have decided that I am going to tell it anyway, because what is underneath that ice is worse than what happens to me for talking, and because there is a child in a photograph on my kitchen counter who I believe exists because somebody chose to tell me a version of this story first. I am paying that forward. I do not know who I am paying it forward to. I hope it is you. The call came early Tuesday. I was in my kitchen in Virginia, making coffee the way I always make it, weighing the beans on a small scale, not because I'm precious about it, but because weighing is a habit, and habits are how I stay functional. The phone rang on the counter, and it was Keller. Keller ran our section, prior service, infantry, something like 20 years in uniform, another 10 in whatever we were doing now. He had the kind of voice that always sounded like he was reading from a page, even when he was improvising, which was most of the time. When he called before 7 in the morning, you did not ask him how his day was going. Pack for cold, he said, real cold. Your wheels up at 11. Where? Anchorage. From Anchorage, further. I'll brief you on the ground. Keller. Pack. He hung up. That was the entire conversation. I packed. Charlie met me at the hangar. He was already there when I arrived. Gear laid out on a tarp, checking his rig the way he always checked his rig. He was a taller man than me, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of forearms you get from actual work rather than gyms. He had gotten married the previous summer. His wife's name was Annie, and she was 5 months pregnant with a boy they had already decided to name after Charlie's grandfather, which was Walter. Charlie did not like the name Walter. He was hoping Annie would change her mind. I know all of that because Charlie and I had spent a lot of hours together in places where there was nothing to do but talk. We had worked with each other for almost 8 years. We had done a job in Kandahar together in the summer of 2011, and a job in a part of Mali I am not allowed to talk about in the spring of 2012, and a number of smaller assignments in between. In Kandahar, I had taken shrapnel in my left thigh during an evening that went sideways, and Charlie had carried me approximately 400 meters to a vehicle that was not supposed to be there, but was. I had never quite figured out how to pay him back for that. He told me I didn't need to, which was the kind of thing Charlie said, but I kept the ledger in my head anyway. Where are we going? He said, without looking up from his rig. Anchorage. From Anchorage, further. Figures. He finished checking his vest, and then he checked mine, because Charlie checked everybody's vest. He had a routine for it. Shoulder straps, plate seating, cummerbund, mag pouches top to bottom, left to right, each one seated and snapped. He did it the same way every time. The first time I saw him do it, I thought he was showing off. By the fifth or sixth time, I realized it was just how he stayed calm. Some people pray. Charlie checked gear. The flight to Anchorage was long and uneventful in the way these flights always were. 3 aircraft, 32 men in each. I didn't know most of them. Charlie knew a few. We slept, mostly, because that was the professional thing to do, and because sleeping kept you from thinking about what you didn't yet know. At one point, Charlie woke up and looked at me and said, "I forgot to tell Annie I was leaving." Then he closed his eyes again. I remember that because he was not the kind of man who forgot things like that. We landed at a military field outside Anchorage in the afternoon, transferred directly to a pair of larger helicopters without going into the terminal, and lifted off again within 40 minutes. The flight from there was another 3 hours, and it went north. I watched the terrain out of a small window, and the terrain got whiter and emptier as we went. At one point we passed over a river that had frozen into flat ribbons, and after that there wasn't much of anything at all. Just snow and black rock and the occasional ridgeline that looked like it had been drawn with a ruler. When we landed on a flat square of ice that had been cleared for the purpose, next to a cluster of prefab modules. There was a single drill tower rising above the modules, maybe 100 feet high, black against the pale sky. The sun was low and red and going down fast. The pilot told us it would be full dark within the hour, and stay that way for the next 18. We were above the Arctic Circle in January. There wasn't going to be much daylight. The modules were arranged in a rough horseshoe around the base of the drill tower. They were painted a dull white, the kind of white that shows up on satellite in summer but disappears into the snow in winter. There were no markings on them. No unit insignia, no corporate logos. If you flew over this place in a bush plane, you would assume it was an abandoned mining camp, and you would not go closer, because bush pilots who go closer to places that aren't on their charts tend to not come home. Charlie stepped out of the helicopter before me and stood for a second in the snow, looking up at the drill tower. His breath clouded once, twice. He looked back at me. "That's a deep one," he said. "Yeah, they don't put 9 kilometers of pipe into the ground for a sampling rig." "No, they do not." He adjusted his sling and started walking toward the main module. I walked with him. Keller met us on the ice. He was wearing the same kit as us, plus a heavier parka, and he had his hood up. The temperature was 40 below. You could feel it in your teeth if you breathed through your mouth. There was something about the air up there that made it hard to focus, as if the cold were pressing down on the thinking part of your head. I had felt cold like that exactly once before, in a training exercise in the Yukon years earlier, and I had not missed it. "Inside," he said. "All of you. Now." Inside the main module, we assembled in a room that had been set up for briefings. 96 men, standing, no chairs. There was a whiteboard with a schematic drawn on it, which I recognized as a deep borehole profile. I had done some security work at a site like this before, years earlier, in the Mojave. The profiles look similar, whether the hole's in sand or ice. The difference is how deep they go. The one on the whiteboard went very, very deep. Keller stood at the front of the room, and he did not smile, because Keller did not smile, but there was something in his face I had never seen before. It took me a minute to place it, and when I did, I didn't like it. He was scared. "I'll be brief," he said. "This site is a federal research installation. What they do here is not your concern, and if any of you know what they do here, you will keep it to yourselves even after today. Roughly 40 hours ago, the site went dark. We have been unable to reach anyone on the inside by any means, including hardline. The civilian employees on site are 32, technical staff, 4 security personnel, and a small administrative team. Total personnel count 41. We believe a hostage situation is in progress." He let that sit for a second. "Our working theory is that one or more of the technical staff has had a psychological episode. Isolation and the dark up here do things to people. It has happened at other sites. You are going in to resolve the situation with minimum force. Recover the civilians, pacify the hostiles, preserve the site. You will move in 3 teams of 32. Team 1 goes first. Team 2 holds at the surface as reserve. Team 3 holds at the helicopters. He pointed at the schematic. The shaft goes down approximately 9 kilometers. There is an elevator to level 3. Below that, you're on ladders and stairs. The site has 7 operational levels. Team 1's objective is to sweep to level 5, secure the main control room, and establish comms. You will maintain contact with the surface every 2 minutes. If you miss a check, Team 2 deploys. Questions? Nobody had questions. Keller read out the team assignments. I was on Team 2. Charlie was on Team 2. We were glad about that because we preferred working together. Team 1 saddled up and went to the shaft. The entrance to the shaft was in a separate module connected to the main cluster by a short covered walkway. Inside, the entrance was a reinforced metal gate, and past the gate was a reception area with desks and filing cabinets, and past the reception area was the elevator. Team 1 went through all of it in about 6 minutes. Keller went with them as far as the elevator and then came back. The elevator took them down, the door shut. We waited. For the first 40 minutes, Team 1 checked in on schedule. Level 1 clear. Level 2 clear. Level 3, control room locked, cutting through the door. Level 3 interior secured, no civilians yet, moving to the stairs. The voice on the other end of the radio was a man named Petrovich, Team 1's lead. I had worked with him a few times. He was competent. He sounded bored on the radio, which was a good sign. Bored is the sound of professionals doing a job. At the 22-minute mark, Petrovich said they had found the first sign of the civilian staff, a coffee pot still warm in the break room on level 2. He said there were no bodies. He said there were no signs of struggle. He said the place looked like people had stepped out for a cigarette break and never come back. Keller asked about the security personnel. Petrovich said they hadn't found any yet. Keller asked him to keep looking. Petrovich said, "Copy that, Chief." At the 30-minute mark, Petrovich's voice on the radio shifted. "Not much. Just enough." He said, "We're getting intermittent audio in the corridor. Sounds like somebody's talking down at the other end, but when we get there, there's nobody there. Could be ventilation acoustics." He paused. "Could be something else." Keller keyed the radio. "What else?" "I don't know, Chief. That's why I said could be." "Copy. Continue sweep." "Copy." At the 42-minute mark, Petrovich said they had reached level 4 and were holding at a sealed door. He said the door had a biometric panel and they were working on it. He said there was a smell he didn't like. He didn't say what the smell was. Keller asked him to specify. Petrovich said, "Organic." Then he said, "Wait." Then the radio cut. We waited another 90 minutes. During those 90 minutes, we tried every frequency we had. We tried the hard line. We tried the backup satellite link. We tried sending a runner down the first 40 meters of ladder on the off chance that a handheld would work where the main rig didn't. None of it produced anything. The whole site below us was dead air. At the 2-hour mark, Keller gave the order. Team 2 was going down. Charlie was standing next to me when the order came. He did not say anything. He just nodded once, very slightly, and started walking toward the gate. We moved through the gate, through the reception area, and into the elevator. The elevator held 16 at a time. We went in 2 loads. The ride down to level 3 took 4 minutes. It was quiet. The lights in the car worked. Nobody spoke. Charlie stood next to me with his rifle across his chest and his breath clouding in the cold air of the car. He did not look at me. He was focused on a point somewhere past the back wall of the elevator. I recognized the look. It was the look he always had before a job went loud. Level 3 opened into a corridor that had been hit by something I initially could not identify. There were scorch marks on the walls and ceiling in a pattern I had never seen before. Long, trailing marks, like someone had dragged a torch across the paint at running speed. The air smelled burned in a way that wasn't quite burned, like something had been heated that wasn't meant to be heated. We moved in pairs. I was paired with Charlie. We took the left side of the corridor. The rest of the team fanned out into the adjoining rooms. The first room I cleared was a break room. Microwave, vending machine, 2 tables, a coffee maker that had been left on long enough that the pot had boiled dry and cracked. Nobody inside. The second room was an equipment storage closet. Nobody inside. The third room was the control room. The door was open. The control room was maybe 30 feet across, rectangular banks of monitors along 3 walls. Most of the monitors were dark. 2 were showing feed from cameras elsewhere in the facility, one of which I could not immediately identify. On a console near the center, a single speaker was making noise. Not loud, soft. It was Petrovich's voice. He was saying, level 5 clear, moving to level 6. That wasn't possible. Petrovich had stopped transmitting at level 4. I looked at Charlie. Charlie was already looking at me. The speaker kept going. It was a loop, or something that was shaped like a loop. Petrovich's voice said, level 5 clear, moving to level 6, and then there was a pause, and then it said, level 5 clear, moving to level 6, and then another pause, and then it said, hey Keller, it's all good down here. You should come see this. And that last line was the part that stopped my heart for a second, because Petrovich had never in his life called Keller by his last name without the word chief in front of it. And Petrovich had never in his life invited anybody to come see anything. It wasn't his voice saying the words. It was the sound of his voice, arranged into a shape that looked like words. Charlie reached over and turned the speaker off. No, he said. No, we don't listen to that. We backed out of the control room. We regrouped with the team in the main corridor. The team lead for Team 2 was a man named Bauer. Bauer was quiet, methodical, an officer who made decisions in silence and did not explain them after. I told him what we had found in the control room. He listened, nodded, and did not respond, and then he ordered us to continue to the stairs. The elevator did not go below level 3. From there we were on foot. The stairwell was narrow and cold. We descended in single file. The lights flickered in a pattern that wasn't a pattern, and after the first turn of the stairs I started to feel the air change. It got thicker, it got warmer, which on a level this deep made no sense, because this deep into the permafrost you were supposed to be at a more or less constant temperature forever. The heat had to be coming from something. At the bottom of the first flight there was a landing, and past the landing was a door. The door was open. Past the door was the hallway that led to the sealed inspection room Petrovich had described. Part of the first team was in the hallway. 8 of them were arranged in a circle. The rest were further in. A line of bodies along the far wall of the hallway, slumped against the paneling, and more beyond that, through the open doorway at the end. I counted maybe 20 that I could see without moving. The rest of the 32 I never saw. I do not know what happened to them. I can guess. I try not to. The 8 in the circle, the ones closest to us, were in their gear, sitting upright with their backs to the center of the circle, facing outward. Their weapons were in their laps. They were wearing their helmets. They were not breathing. Their eyes were open. I took a step closer and I saw that their skin had a strange texture to it, like a shirt that has been left out in the rain and then dried flat. When I nudged the shoulder of the nearest one with my boot, the body didn't rock the way a body rocks. It moved like a tent that had lost a pole. There was no weight inside it. Charlie said something very quietly beside me. I couldn't make out the words the first time, so I asked him to repeat it. They're still warm, he said. I crouched next to the nearest one and put the back of my glove against the man's cheek, above the beard line where the skin was exposed. Charlie was right. The skin was warm. Not living warm. Something closer to the warmth of coffee that has been sitting on a warmer for an hour, a warmth that was being maintained rather than generated. I do not know how to explain this. I felt it, and I understood it, and I did not want to keep feeling it. I looked up at the man's face. His name tag said Reyes. I had never worked with Reyes. I had seen him once in a briefing room. His eyes were open, and they were looking in the direction his body was facing, which was outward, which was the direction all of them were facing. Every man in the circle was looking outward. It was as if they had been placed there for a purpose, a perimeter around something that was no longer inside the circle, because it was no longer anywhere you could point to. Bauer crouched next to the nearest one, examined it without touching, and stood up again. Nobody touches anybody, he said. We are getting out of this hallway. I stood up too quickly and my vision grayed for a second at the edges. I put a hand on the wall to steady myself. The wall was warm. The wall was warm in the same way the body had been warm. I took my hand off the wall and did not say anything about it, because I didn't want to be the one who said it first. The rest of the team behind us had gone very quiet. One of the men near the back, a specialist named Hayes, was saying something under his breath, the same thing over and over. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't want to. Bauer pointed at the opposite end of the hallway. We move. Now. 2 by 2. Keep your intervals. We started moving. Halfway down the hallway, Charlie stopped walking. I felt him stop before I saw it, because we were moving in close formation, and his rhythm had been matching mine for the last 10 minutes, and then it wasn't. Did you hear that? He said. Hear what? He was looking at one of the doors off the hallway. It was a utility closet, or had been. It had a small rectangular window near the top, and the window had gone black from something on the other side of the glass. Annie, he said. That was Annie. Annie's in Maryland. I know she's in Maryland. He didn't move. He was still looking at the door. I know she's in Maryland. But that was her voice. Charlie, listen to me. You do not move toward that door. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. He was not in any kind of fog or trance. He knew exactly what was happening to him. That made it worse. I know, he said. I know. He started walking again. We kept moving. Farther down the hallway, behind us, one of the men from the back of the formation did not keep moving. I didn't see him go. I only heard him go. There was a small sound like a man saying the word Mom very softly, and then there was nothing. When Bauer called the count a minute later, we were one short. The man was named Garza. He had been standing near Hayes. Hayes was white as a sheet and would not look at the rest of us. Bauer did not send anyone back to look for Garza. Bauer was not sentimental. We kept moving. The hallway ended at a T-junction. Bauer split the team. 16 went left, 16 went right. Charlie and I were in the right group, which was led by Bauer himself. We proceeded down a service corridor that was narrower than the main hallway and less well lit. The walls were painted a pale green that had begun to peel, and there were labels on the pipes overhead in small white stenciled letters that identified them as ventilation, water, and something called magnetic shielding return, which I did not have time to think about too hard. Within the first 200 feet of the service corridor, we lost 2 more men. The first was Osei. Osei's wife had died in a car accident 18 months earlier, and he thought he heard her calling him from a side room. He got 3 paces into the room before the door closed behind him. We could not open it again. The second was a man I did not know well, a specialist whose name I never learned, who turned a corner and did not come back. By this point we had lost 3 of our own, on top of whatever had been done to the first team. We were moving more slowly because nobody wanted to be the next one. Bauer ordered us to put in earplugs, which helped some of us, but not the ones whose voices came from inside their own heads. Charlie was holding up better than most. He had heard Annie once, and then he had closed a door in his head and locked it. I could see him doing it. He kept his eyes forward and his grip on his rifle steady, and he didn't look at any more doors. We reached another junction. Bauer paused. We were looking at 3 possible paths. The main corridor continuing forward, a smaller service passage to the left, a ladder going up through a narrow shaft to the right. Bauer said, "We take the main corridor." And that was when Charlie and I, without conferring, without looking at each other, stepped out of formation. I can't explain why. I have tried to explain it to the people who debriefed me, and I have tried to explain it to myself, and the best I can do is say that something told me the main corridor was exactly the direction Bauer was supposed to go, and that I was not supposed to go with him. Charlie felt the same thing at the same moment. We looked at each other. We stepped sideways into the service passage to the left. We did not say a word. Bauer did not stop us. I think he may have felt the same thing, and I think he went the other way anyway because somebody had to. I don't know what happened to Bauer and the remaining men of our group. I never saw any of them again. Charlie and I walked for maybe 6 minutes in the service passage. It was quieter than the main corridor had been. The pipes overhead stopped hissing at one point. The lights stopped flickering. The air grew still and dry, like the inside of a library. We did not talk. Every so often I heard Charlie adjust his grip on his rifle. The service passage opened into a small junction with a single door on the far side. The door was metal, unmarked, and slightly ajar. I remember that my first thought was that the door was ajar in a way that did not look accidental. It was ajar by exactly the width of a hand, as if someone had opened it for us and then stepped back. We approached it. Charlie took the left. I took the right. I pushed the door the rest of the way open with the muzzle of my rifle. The room on the other side was small, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. There was a single fluorescent bulb in the ceiling that was on. There were no chairs. There was no desk. There was one man standing in the middle of the room. He was wearing something that looked like an exoskeleton, but damaged. The frame was cracked along one leg and there were burn marks across the chest plate. The helmet was retracted. His face was the first thing I saw. His face was my face. Older, lined, scarred down one side, from the temple to the jaw. A scar that looked like it had been made by something with teeth. His hair was gray at the temples. His eyes were my eyes, the same gray color, and he was looking at both of us the way a man looks at his own photograph from a long time ago. Charlie raised his rifle. I did not raise mine. Something in my chest knew I was not being threatened. "Stand down," I said. My voice didn't sound right. "Stand down, Charlie. That's your face." "I know. That's your face." "Charlie, stand down." Charlie lowered the rifle slowly. The older man in the exoskeleton did not move. "I don't have a lot of time," the older man said. His voice was my voice, roughened by years I hadn't lived yet. "We're not going to be able to talk through everything. I'm going to give you what you need, and then we're going to move. Who are you?" He smiled, which was the strangest thing of all, because it was a smile I recognized, and it was the smile I made when I was tired and didn't want to explain something I didn't have the energy to explain. "You know who I am." I stared at him. I was not going to say it out loud. I wasn't sure I believed it, and I wasn't going to say it out loud. "How?" I said. "That's the part I don't have time for. The short version is that we got the technology to work about 30 years from now, not because we wanted to, because we had to. Something went wrong and we tried to fix it, and this is the third attempt, and if it doesn't work, there isn't going to be a fourth." Charlie was staring at both of us. He was not saying anything. "What went wrong?" I said. The older man looked at me for a long moment. He seemed to be deciding how much to tell me. In the end, he said, "This site, this hole. It was a bad idea from the start. But the problem isn't the hole. The problem is what's at the bottom of it, what the drilling woke up." "What is it?" "Older than you have language for. Older than the rock. It was here before the planet finished cooling. It's been asleep underneath the crust for so long that the concept of time doesn't mean anything to it. The people who built this site thought they were studying unusual seismic activity. They were not. They were studying something that had started to notice that there were things above it that could notice it back. How do we stop it? You don't. Not the way you're thinking. This thing doesn't move. It doesn't need to. It's not like a creature. Not in any way that would make sense to you. It doesn't have a body the way you have a body. The way it reaches out is through minds. Awareness near the shaft bottom, that's the rung it climbs. The more aware minds you put near it, the farther up it comes. The drilling brought minds close. Your team being here, right now, is bringing it closer." He paused. His face, my face, looked tired in a way I had never looked tired. "The voices," I said. "The voices aren't the thing. The voices are the footprints of the thing. It's learning how your brains work. Once it knows how, it doesn't need the voices anymore." "What about the bodies upstairs?" "It took what it wanted and left the rest." "Which was what?" "Everything about them that was them. The parts of them that made them who they were. The parts that remembered. The parts that loved. It took those parts into itself, and it learned from them. The bodies you saw in the hallway, they're not dead the way dead people are dead. They're not anything anymore. What used to be inside them isn't the thing now, and the thing is going to use what it learned from Reyes and Petrovich and the rest of them the same way it used the voices on your radio. It's going to use it to get closer to the rest of us." "How long has it been doing this?" Not long. 2, maybe 3 days, since the first engineer went too deep. Before that, it had been sleeping for longer than there were animals. It may have gone to sleep before there was anything alive on this planet to speak of. The people who built the site didn't wake it. They just made it roll over. The drilling is what woke it. Specifically, the part where a geologist went down to level 6 alone, on a whim, and stood at the sample collection phase for about 90 seconds before he walked back to the elevator. He thought about his mother while he was down there. That was enough. That was enough. That was enough. I looked at Charlie. Charlie was listening to all of this with the focus of a man who knew he was going to be tested on it later. He was not asking questions. He was remembering. "Why are you telling me this?" I said. "Because I need you to get out. And if I don't, then what happened last time happens again. And the time before that. We've run this loop 3 times. Every time, you die at the bottom of that ladder. Every time, we try something different to get you out. This is the last one we have. What's different this time?" This time, I'm telling you the truth about Charlie. Charlie looked at him. The older man did not look at Charlie. He kept looking at me. "Charlie isn't going to make it," he said. "I'm sorry. I've watched it go 3 different ways, and he doesn't make it in any of them. The voices get him. It's not because he's weaker. It's because of Annie and the baby, and it knows that, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you try to save him, you both die. If you leave him, you live. Those are the only 2 outcomes. I have watched them both, and I have watched them both twice. That's not a choice. No, it's not." He reached inside the chest plate of his exoskeleton and pulled out something small and flat. He held it out to me. I took it. It was a Polaroid photograph. It was creased at the corners. The image was of a man sitting on a porch in summer, wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans, holding a small girl in his arms. The girl was maybe 3 years old. She had dark hair, and she was laughing at something out of frame. The man on the porch was me. He looked 10 years older than I was now. I had never seen the porch. I had never met the girl. I did not have a daughter. "Her name is Marlowe," the older man said. "You named her after your mother." I couldn't speak. For a second. "She exists because you live. She does not exist in any of the versions where you don't. Charlie has a son coming." "I know. He has a son coming." "I know." We looked at each other. "I can't make this choice for you," he said. "I am not going to try. I'm going to tell you how to get out. Service ladder, 2 corridors east, 4 levels, straight up to the surface. Do not stop. Do not turn around for any voice, even if you recognize the voice. Even if you recognize the voice of the person climbing the ladder with you. The only voice you trust is your own, inside your own head, right now, because it is not trained to use yours yet. That will change. Go." He stepped back into the shadows at the edge of the room. I don't know how he did it. He was there, and then he was not. The door behind us was still open. Charlie and I left. We walked in silence for the first 2 corridors. Charlie was carrying the same rifle he had carried the whole way, but he was carrying it like it had gotten heavier. His pace was slightly off. I could feel him not wanting to say anything. "You heard all of that," I said. "I heard all of that. He could be lying. He's you. He doesn't have a reason to lie. We don't know what's down here. We don't know what it can make itself look like." "Yeah, but you know what your own face looks like. And that was your face." We kept walking. 2 corridors east, 4 levels up. I counted doors. At the second corridor I turned. Charlie turned with me. 10 steps in, we found the service ladder. It was mounted inside a vertical shaft about 4 feet across, with a narrow grid floor at the bottom and a grid ceiling at the top that I couldn't see from where we stood. The ladder was bolted to the wall, with steel brackets. It went straight up. I looked at Charlie. "You first," I said. "Why me first?" "Because I want you in front of me. That way I know you're moving." He nodded. He put his rifle over his shoulder by the sling, and he started to climb. I waited until he had 6 rungs on me, and I started after him. We climbed. The shaft was quiet for the first 2 levels. I counted landings. At each landing there was a small gridded platform and a door leading to whatever corridor lay at that depth. We did not stop at any of them. I kept looking up at Charlie's boots as they moved above me. His pace was steady, every rung, every second, like a metronome. I recognized the rhythm from the times we had fast roped out of helicopters together, and from the time in Kandahar when he had carried me across an open courtyard with small arms fire coming in from two directions, and his breathing had matched his footfalls exactly, because that was how Charlie stayed inside himself under pressure. He counted. He breathed on the count. He moved on the count. I had always envied it a little. The shaft had its own sounds. Water dripping somewhere below, slow and rhythmic, like a faucet that had not been tightened properly. The hum of whatever ventilation system was still running on the levels below us. A distant metal ticking that might have been cooling pipes. The sounds were ordinary. The sounds were what you would hear in any industrial shaft anywhere in the world. I held on to them. I kept climbing. At the landing, between the first and second level up, I looked down once. Just once. I don't know why. The shaft below me went down into blackness, and the blackness went deeper than it should have, given that there were supposed to be levels with lights on them down there. Either the lights had all gone out, or I was looking down into something that wasn't the shaft anymore. I didn't look down again. At the landing, between the second and third level up, Charlie stopped. "Don't stop," I said. I heard something. "You're not going to hear anything. Climb." It wasn't a voice. It was a sound. A sound from up. I looked past him. I couldn't see anything. Just the ladder going up into dimness, and the edges of the next landing. "It was probably the wind," I said. "We're getting close to the surface. Keep climbing." Okay. He kept climbing. At the landing, between the third and fourth level up, he stopped again. This time he didn't say anything. He just stopped moving. "Charlie." He did not answer. "Charlie, move." Nothing. I climbed the last 6 rungs between us and put my hand on his ankle. His leg was rigid. He was listening to something. I couldn't hear it. "Charlie, look at me." He looked down at me. His eyes were not right. Not in the sense that they had gone glassy or vacant, because they had not. They were too sharp, too focused, like he was looking at something more important than I was, something that required all of his attention, and I was an interruption. "She's here," he said. "No, she isn't. She's right at the top of the ladder. She's waiting for me. She says the baby came early." "Charlie, look at me. Your wife is in Maryland. The baby is not here. Your baby is in your wife, in Maryland, 5 months from now. Look at me." He looked at me. He tried. I could see him trying. There was a moment, maybe a second, maybe less, when his eyes were his eyes, and he was looking at me, and he was there. I saw the moment. Then it passed. "She's here," he said again, and he let go of the ladder. I caught his wrist. I had half a second of reaction time, and I caught his wrist, and I held him against the ladder with my shoulder. He was heavier than I was, and he was not fighting me exactly, but he was trying to let go, and holding him against the rungs took all of my strength. "Charlie." My voice was cracking. "Charlie, no. Not this. Not you. She's here. She is not here." I got my left arm around his chest, and I pulled him down onto the landing. We sat on the gridded platform, and I held him there while he shook. He was not crying. He was not resisting anymore. He had gone somewhere I could not reach. I thought about what the older man had said. I thought about the 2 outcomes, and the Polaroid, and the girl with dark hair, and Annie in Maryland, and the son named Walter that Charlie did not like the name of. And I thought, no. No, I am not leaving him. I pulled him up. I got his arm over my shoulder. I got his hand on the next rung. I physically put his hand on the rung, and I said, "Climb, Charlie. Climb for me. Climb for Annie. Climb for Walter." And after a long second, his hand closed on the rung. And he started to climb. I climbed below him. I kept my hand on the back of his vest. We climbed like that, me guiding his boots onto the rungs, him moving like a man in a dream, for the next 15 rungs or so. I could see the final landing above us. Past the landing was another short ladder. Past that was the hatch that led to the surface. We were going to make it. That was when I heard it. below me in the shaft. A sound I had been hoping was the sound of nothing. A sound I had been hoping was pipes. It was not pipes. Something was on the ladder. It was not climbing the way I was climbing. It was climbing faster. It was climbing the way a spider climbs a wall, the way a thing climbs that does not have to follow the rhythm of arms and legs because it does not have those things in the same way. I could hear the rungs taking the weight in a pattern that was not a human pattern, and I could hear that whatever it was gaining on me. I looked at Charlie above me. He was moving, but he was moving slow. He was still somewhere else in his head. If I kept guiding him, we were both going to die on that ladder. If I let him go and climbed for the hatch, I might make it. If I let him go, I pushed him up harder. I got under his boots and I pushed. I said his name and I said his wife's name and I said the name he didn't like for the son he was going to have. I said all of it. He climbed faster. The thing below me kept gaining. We made the final landing. I pushed Charlie onto the platform and I got up after him and I pointed at the last ladder to the hatch. Go, I said. Go, Charlie. Go first. I am right behind you. He went. Slow, but he went. He started up the last ladder. I climbed behind him. I was 6 rungs from daylight, from safety, when I heard it climbing up the ladder behind me, faster and faster. This is it, I knew. I wouldn't make it. There would be no time. Damn it, Charlie. I had gone back for him. I had stopped on the landing and held him and talked him up 4 rungs at a time, and I had used all of the time the older man had bought for me. I had used all of it. And now the thing was right below me, right below us, and it was going to take the last one off the ladder, and the last one on the ladder was me. I shoved Charlie up. I put everything I had left into pushing him through the hatch. The hatch was a circular opening at the top of the shaft into a small vestibule that opened to the outside. Pale blue Arctic light was coming down through it. Daylight, or as close to daylight as you got up there in January. The reflected glow from a sky that wouldn't see the sun for another 2 weeks. Charlie got through the hatch. I saw his boots disappear into the pale light. I reached up for the edge of the hatch. My fingers closed on the metal lip, and something closed around my ankle. It was cold. It was not like being grabbed by a hand. It was like being grabbed by the idea of a hand. There were too many points of contact. The thing had fingers, and the fingers did not stop where fingers stop. They kept going. They wrapped around my boot and my shin and the back of my calf all at once from below, and they began to pull. I did something I am not proud of. I kicked down hard with my other boot, and I felt my heel connect with something that yielded and then gave the way a bag of wet sand gives when you step on it. The grip loosened for a second. I pulled myself up through the hatch. I got my chest over the lip. Charlie was above me, on his knees on the vestibule floor, reaching down with both hands. His face was his own again. Whatever had been inside his head on the ladder was gone. He was there, and he was looking at me, and he was reaching for me. His hand closed around mine. For 1 second, I had him. I had my left hand gripping the lip of the hatch and my right hand in Charlie's and my chest up over the edge. Then something below me took my ankle again. I felt it pull. And I felt Charlie pull against it with everything he had, and for a second we held. Then Charlie's grip shifted, not weakened, shifted. He let go of my hand and he got his hand under my armpit, and he hauled me, with everything he had left, up through the hatch, which meant his own balance shifted, which meant he went forward over the lip of the hatch. I saw it happen. I had a second to see it happen. Charlie went forward, over the edge, past me, down into the shaft. He did not scream. He looked at me as he fell. He looked at me for the entire second it took him to pass me, and in that second his eyes were his own, and he knew exactly what was happening, and he had chosen it. He had seen the Polaroid too. I heard him hit something below me. I heard it was not the floor. I hauled myself the rest of the way out of the hatch. I rolled onto the ice floor of the vestibule. I lay there for maybe 3 seconds before I got up. I got up because I had to look. I crawled back to the hatch. I looked down. Something was on the ladder about 6 feet below the hatch. It was shaped like a man. It was wearing what looked like the kind of parka we had all been issued that morning. Its face was in shadow. It was holding on to the ladder with more hands than a man has, and those hands were too long and had the wrong number of joints, and it was looking up at me. It did not come any higher. It could have. The hatch was open. The ladder went all the way up. There was nothing physically stopping it. It would not step into the light. I closed the hatch. I heard it seal. I sat on the ice floor of the vestibule with my back against the wall, and I stayed there until Keller's men broke down the outer door. The surface was exactly where I had left it. Same snow, same black sky, same red sun low on the horizon, even lower than it had been when I went in. The only difference was the number of men standing in the snow, which was fewer than it should have been. The third team, the one that held at the helicopters, had been deployed into the shaft at some point while I was down there. Nobody had told them to stop. Keller was on the radio when I came out, and what he was saying into the radio was going unanswered. I could see his face when he realized I was standing there. It was not relief. He had the face of a man doing math. How many? He said. 4 of us. I said, maybe. I don't know about the others. I know about me and Charlie, and I saw 2 from the other split make it to the corridor. I don't know where they are now. Charlie. I shook my head. Keller looked at me for a long time. Then he looked at the drill tower. Then he looked back at me. We'll talk inside, he said. We talked inside. For a long time. Over the next 2 days, me and 3 other men, we were talked to by people I did not know in rooms that had been set up specifically for the purpose of talking to us. I was polygraphed twice. I told them the truth. I told them about the bodies and the voices and the older man and the Polaroid and the thing on the ladder. I showed them the Polaroid. They took it away and photographed it and gave it back. I don't know if they believed any of it. I do know they stopped taking notes partway through my second interview. The incident was given a number, 47-229-alpha. The file was classified at a level above my clearance, and the portions of my debrief I was allowed to retain amounted to approximately 1 page of a timeline, with most of the specifics redacted. I signed 3 non-disclosure agreements. I was placed on indefinite paid leave. Within a month, the site was decommissioned. I know this because a friend of a friend who works in federal procurement saw the paperwork for the concrete. They poured enough concrete into that hole to sink a building. The surface modules were dismantled and flown out. The drill tower was cut down to ground level, and the pieces were flown out too. The coordinates of the site were scrubbed from 3 separate map databases that I am aware of, and probably others I am not. If you went looking for it now, you would not find it. I asked Keller once, about 6 months after the incident, what the site had actually been for. We were in a parking lot in Virginia, outside a diner. He had called me out to talk about something else. I got him on the question while we were walking to our cars. He looked at me for a long time. You know what it was for, he said. I want to hear you say it. He didn't say it. He got in his car and he drove off. That was my last conversation with Keller. He retired 3 months later. I have not seen him since, and I do not expect to. Charlie's body was never recovered. That was not a surprise, but it was hard to explain. His wife Annie was told that there had been an accident at a classified research installation in the American interior, and that her husband had died performing his duties with distinction, and that the nature of the work made full disclosure impossible. She was given a folded flag and a closed casket with sandbags inside it, and a posthumous commendation that she was not allowed to read in detail. I went to the funeral. I stood in the back. I could not bring myself to go up to her. I thought about going up to her every day for 6 months, and I never did it. The funeral was at a small Lutheran church in a suburb of Baltimore. It was a Tuesday in February. There was snow on the ground. I wore a charcoal suit I had bought the week before, because I had not owned a suit. The pastor spoke for about 20 minutes about a man he had met maybe twice, and he did a reasonable job given the material he had. Annie spoke after. She was composed. She talked about the way Charlie used to make coffee for her in the morning before she was awake, how she would come down to the kitchen and find a cup waiting on the counter with a napkin folded under it, every day without fail, for the entire 3.5 years they had been together. She said she didn't know what she was going to do without her morning coffee. A few people laughed, the kind of broken laugh people make at funerals when they need to exhale. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't do anything. I had taught Charlie how to make coffee that way. I had shown him the scale trick, the weighing, the water temperature. He had made fun of me for being precious about it for about a week, and then he had started doing it the same way, and then he had kept doing it for his wife. Walter was born in May. Annie named him Walter after all. I sent a card without a return address. I did not sign it. I keep the Polaroid in my kitchen. Not in a drawer. On the counter, in a wooden frame I bought for the purpose. I look at it every morning while the coffee grinder is running, which gives me about 40 seconds of staring at it before the water is ready. The girl in the photograph is Marlowe. She has dark hair and my eyes. She is laughing at something. I have not yet met her. I am not in a position to meet her. She would have to be the daughter of someone, and I am not married, and the woman I am going to marry, whoever she is, has not yet crossed paths with me. I know, because the older man on the ladder had a scar down the left side of his face that I do not yet have, and I know that he was me, and I know that the scar came from something. I am waiting for it. Sometimes I think about what Charlie did. I think about the shift in his hand, from holding mine to hooking under my armpit. I think about the weight transfer. I think about how long he had been carrying men out of bad places, going back to the summer of 2011 when he carried me 400 meters to a vehicle that was not supposed to be there. I think about the ledger I kept in my head, which I never got to close. I think he closed it for me. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I don't know if it counts as closed, if I'm the only one who knows. I went to see Annie once, about 2 years later. We had coffee. She was doing all right. Walter was 18 months old and into everything. She told me Charlie had always said if something ever happened, she should call me. I said that was kind of him. I did not tell her what had happened on the ladder. I am not going to tell her, ever. While we were sitting at her kitchen table, Walter came in from the living room, holding a plastic truck by one wheel, dragging it across the tile. He walked straight up to me and looked at me the way small children look at adults they have not met before, which is direct and without any of the social machinery that keeps the rest of us from staring. He had Charlie's eyes. He had the exact shape of Charlie's jaw, which is a thing you do not really appreciate about a person until you see it on a face that is not their face. He stood there for maybe 10 seconds, and then he put the truck on my foot, which was apparently a gift, and then he turned around and walked back into the living room. Annie was watching me during all of this. She didn't say anything about it, because there wasn't anything to say. She just watched. I looked down at the truck on my foot. I did not pick it up for a minute, because I wasn't sure I could pick it up without my hand shaking, and I did not want her to see my hand shake. Eventually I picked it up and put it on the table, and we kept talking about other things. I don't know if the thing underneath that hole is still down there. I am told by people I am not going to name that it is, and that it is quieter than it was, and that they are watching, and that the monitoring system they have in place is adequate, by which I think they mean they have monitoring that reports up before it gets overwhelmed. I don't trust it. The older man said this was the third attempt. He didn't say what happened to the first two. He didn't say what would happen to this one if it failed. He also didn't say whether I was the reason the attempt worked or Charlie was. I think about that a lot. I'm going to give you a rule. You can take it or leave it. It took me a long time to learn, and it cost me a friend who was a better man than I am, and who is the reason I am still here. If you ever hear a voice calling you by name from somewhere you cannot see, you do not answer. You do not turn your head. You do not slow your pace. You do not even acknowledge inside your own mind that you have heard it. Because hesitation is the rung it climbs. Recognition is the rung it climbs. Love is the rung it climbs. And that is the one that takes the best people you know every single time. You walk forward and you keep walking. You stay in the open. You stay in the light. And if something grabs your ankle at the top of a ladder, you kick. That's the story. I don't tell it often. I don't tell it the same way twice either. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting with me through the dark part. There are more where this came from, and the nights are long up here in the cold months. Stay with me a while longer. I have more I can tell you, if you want to hear it. Sleep well, if you can.